Forget no contact. Silence is cheap. A blocked number means nothing if their absence still rearranges your heartbeat. You think distance is power. Reality is colder. If your nervous system still rises and falls with the possibility of their return, you are not free. You are simply obeying them from farther away. That is not detachment. That is dependency with better branding. That is the trap. You removed the contact. You kept the obedience. You closed the door. You left the throne untouched. You stopped reaching outward. You kept waiting inwardly. Then you called it healing. But healing is not the absence of messages. Healing is the absence of internal permission. The real prison was never the phone. It was the authority you gave their silence over your state. So no distance alone does not make you sovereign. Sometimes it only makes your dependence quieter. And quiet dependence is still dependence. Look at the tax you keep paying. You say it is over. Your body disagrees. A notification drops and your chest tightens. A name appears and your rhythm fractures. A memory passes and the whole day leans toward them again. You are no longer in the relationship. Yet inwardly, you are still reporting for duty, still scanning, still interpreting, still hoping silence will deliver a verdict that restores your worth. That is why you are depleted, not because silence is heavy, because you are still working inside it. Still on call for a story your real life already left behind. This is the hidden fatigue. Surveillance. Self-surveillance. Watching for signs. Watching for meaning. Watching for proof that you mattered enough to be remembered. That is why burnout appears even in stillness. Because your body is not resting. It is bracing. Because your mind is not healing. It is monitoring. Because your nervous system has turned longing into a full-time occupation, you call it discipline. Often it is captivity with elegant language. That is why the silence does not feel peaceful. Because peace does not monitor. Peace does not wait at a closed door for footsteps. Peace does not measure worth against a reaction that may never come. When too much of you is still stationed at what ended, the rest of life begins to thin. This is not fate. It is conditioning. Your system learned their pattern: absence, craving reward, collapse. A little warmth after distance. A little attention after silence. A little hope after withdrawal. That is how the loop forms. Not through truth, through chemistry, through repetition. Your body adapted. It stopped reading them as a person and started reading them as a trigger, a signal, a source of unpredictable reward. And unpredictable reward is addictive. It is the same principle that trains the gambler. Not certainty, intermittence. Not stability, possibility. The next moment might redeem everything. The next message might justify the waiting. So the body learns to obey possibility. That is why one message can feel like a resurrection, and one silence can feel like punishment. Because the system has been trained to react before thought can intervene. This is where Stoicism begins, at the end of illusion. If an external signal can still edit your inner climate, you are not being guided by truth. You are being governed by habit. And habit, unlike fate, can be retrained. That matters, because it means you are not cursed. You are conditioned. And what is conditioned can be interrupted, rewritten, disciplined. That is the opening. Not romance, not destiny. Retraining. That is where sovereignty becomes possible. The Stoics had a word for the final territory, Prohairesis, the inner command, the place where meaning is assigned, where judgment is formed, where choice is made. Marcus Aurelius understood something most people never do. Power was never the ability to make the world behave. Power was the refusal to let the world govern his mind. He lived among war, pressure, betrayal, plague, and instability. Yet his deepest discipline was not control over events. It was guarding the last interior room. That is Stoic authority. Not control of circumstance. Control of participation. If their silence still dictates your mood, if their return still decides your value, if their attention still changes your sense of self, then you are not self-governed yet. You are externally edited. A sovereign person does not ask, "Do they miss me?" A sovereign person asks, "Why is my peace still waiting for someone else's permission?" That is the heavier question. Because the humiliation was not only that they left, it was that even after they left, they still had access to your operating system. That is not love. That is occupation. There is a brutal difference between a tactic and a standard. A tactic is still negotiation. It hopes silence will be seen. It hopes absence will be interpreted. It hopes distance will deliver a lesson. A tactic still needs an audience. It still depends on their reaction to complete its meaning. A tactic performs. A tactic waits. A standard is different. A standard says, "I do not reopen doors that lead me away from myself." That one sentence changes the architecture of your life. Because now silence is no longer theater. It becomes structure. No longer a message. No longer delayed revenge. No longer a disguised plea to be understood. Just order. Just law. Just self-respect without an audience. If your healing still depends on whether they notice your absence, then your absence is not peace. It is a signal flare. And signal flares still beg to be seen. A standard does not beg. A standard remains even when no one is watching, no one is asking, and no one comes back. That is why standards outlast moods. Loneliness comes. Nostalgia comes. Memory gets warm. And if you only have a tactic, you negotiate again. But if you have a standard, you do not reopen the case. This is the Stoic cut: internal over external. Rule over reaction. Law over mood. A tactic still worships their perception. A standard returns authority to you. Imagine a control room inside you. Stone walls. Bronze switches. Deep amber light. A central console where breath, mood, hope, fear, longing, and worth all connect. For too long they had the codes. A text hit hope. A silence hit fear. A memory hit longing. A mention of their name hit collapse. And your entire system obeyed. That was the true bondage. Not love. Access. Not romance. Control. Healing begins the day they lose the codes. The day their name enters the room and no switch moves. No spike. No collapse. No internal alarm. Only stillness. And stillness is more powerful than silence. Because silence can break. Stillness cannot be manipulated. Picture a lighthouse in winter fog. Waves hit the stone. Wind claws the glass. The sea keeps performing its old violence. But the structure does not lean. It does not chase the storm. It holds. That is what you are building. Not revenge. Structure. The game ends the moment they no longer have access to your internal control room. Because every game requires a response. And once the response is gone, the strategy dies with it. You do not need more quotes. You need protocols. 1. Audit the silence. Ask the question that destroys illusion. If you knew with certainty they would never check on you again, would you still hold this silence the same way? If the answer is no, do not call it peace. Call it performance. Truth is the first medicine. 2. Reclaim the remote. When the wave hits, do not romanticize it. Do not call it fate. Do not call it soul recognition. Call it conditioning. Then interrupt the loop physically. Move. Breathe. Train, work, walk. Choice over chemistry. Discipline over craving. Structure over fantasy. 3. Build the standard. Do not heal through speeches. Heal through repetitions. I do not trade peace for ambiguity. I do not return to what made me smaller. I do not beg to be chosen by the unsure. I do not confuse attention with love. A standard is not what you post. It is what you repeat when feeling turns against you. You do not need to be missed to be worthy. You do not need a final message to be whole. You do not need to be understood to be free. No contact is not the goal. Self-government is. Because silence can fail in 1 week midnight. But a standard holds. A standard keeps you upright when memory gets warm, when loneliness gets clever, when the old story tries to sound sacred again. That is when you know you have finally come home. Not because you became cold, because you became governed. Absence is no longer a weapon. Longing is no longer an identity. And their silence no longer edits your worth. Forget no contact. Build a standard. Then live so deeply inside it that even your silence stops asking to be understood. If these words found the silence in you, we will meet again on the next road.